Hi, thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for the amazing presentation, Rahul, Ethan, and Annabelle. We are so impressed by just the level of impact that you've had and your ability to partner with one of the most respected lawmakers in Indiana, State Senator Ron Alting, who all of us on the staff are very, very fond of. Um, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise here, so if if we could have everyone mute, that would be fantastic. All right, thank you. Um, okay, well, before we dive into the final panel discussion, which of course will involve Indra, Kim, Tim, and then Paula Brooks, all of whom I'm going to be introducing for a second, I did want to actually take a few more minutes to offer some words of gratitude. So bear with me while I share my screen once again. We've got Paula here. Just one second, please. Okay, and Emily, if you wouldn't mind putting up the, there we go, thank you. First of all, I want to again thank all of our incredible attendees for being here, being so engaged, offering fantastic questions. We know that there are so many things that you could be doing, and the fact that you're here is such a expression of your commitment to the sustainability cause in Indiana. I also want to say that before I formally depart the Hoosier Environmental Council, I'm going to be writing a formal farewell thank you letter in which I hope to do justice to the incredible amount of people in Indiana who have helped me along my 14-year journey. I probably won't get to everybody, but I certainly want to do my very best to honor and recognize all the great people who have made such a difference in my tenure at HEC. I wanted to also take a moment to individually recognize the members of the Hoosier Environmental Council Board of Directors. I had a chance to give a brief tribute to Tom Barrett, our board chair, earlier today. Again, our consultant and an eco-entrepreneur by background. Dr. Julie Peller is professor of chemistry at Valparaiso University. And Julie has really been such a great wealth of knowledge to us in Northwest Indiana in terms of helping us to understand the landscape, the key environmental activists helping to build partnerships with us, helping to build bridges with the faith community there, and providing technical assistance on environmental justice issues. Jeff Barnes is a database developer for the Veterans Hospital. And Jeff has been great in terms of providing database analysis for HEC. And of course, we use a lot of databases in terms of our grassroots organizing work and our fundraising work. Jeff Tunn is a longstanding IT executive, and he's also an author. And he is someone who I've been able to look to for great guidance on strategic and programmatic matters, in particular on the White River Initiative. Dr. Deborah Javelin is a professor of political science at Notre Dame University, and she has been an ambassador to us in North Central Indiana, introducing us not only to professors and other allies in the South Bend area, but beyond. Corey Clark is a longstanding marketing executive, and Corey was the prior chair of our board to Tom Barrett. And Corey was a great partner during that time as board chair, someone that I could really think through personnel and finance and organizational issues with. And he recently has decided to step down from the board to focus more on his family and on his new job. And we wish him much success in his next chapter. And we're so grateful for all these years of service to HEC. Ellen Rosenthal is the newest member of our board, the former president of Conner Prairie, one of the celebrated museums of Indiana. And along with Tom Barrett, she serves as the co-chair of the search committee who will find my successor. So we're grateful for her to take up this opportunity. Lastly, I want to thank David Van Gilder and Kevin McKinney. David and Kevin, along with Jeff Barnd, have been on the board of the Hoosier Environmental Council since the beginning of my tenure in December 2007. And of all of the board members, past and present, I have spent the most time with them. David Van Gilder is a partner at a very well-respected law firm in Fort Wayne, and David and his wife Faith have been real ambassadors of the Hoosier Environmental Council to Northeast Indiana. Furthermore, David generously donated his time to enable a very complex piece of litigation in the effort to try to stop the new terrain I-69 highway, a legal endeavor that probably saved HEC on the order of tens of thousands of dollars. So we're grateful for that. And of course, I've always been able to lean on David for programmatic and strategic and financial and fundraising counsel over the years. Lastly, I want to thank Kevin McKinney, who is the longtime publisher, founder, and managing editor of Nuvo, a very well-respected newspaper that focuses on arts and culture, as well as putting a spotlight on the very issues that are near and dear to the heart of the Hoosier Environmental Council, such as coal ash and factory farming. Kevin is someone who was instrumental in the rebranding of the Hoosier Environmental Council a couple of years after I became executive director, reinventing the identity, reinvigorating it along with Ann Laker, Elizabeth Mahoney, David Cadlick, and senior staff at HEC. And Kevin has always been someone that I can lean on for advice organizationally, programmatically, financial, and fundraising over the years. So very grateful to Kevin, very grateful for the very strong relationship we have with Kevin and his family. Now I want to also mention a couple other staff members who time constraints did not allow me to get to at the very beginning, because I knew we were already going to be a little bit delayed at the very start of HEC. Marianne Holland, who wonderfully gave our voiceover for the award ceremony, leads our development team. And Marianne leads with joy. And she leads a fantastic development team overall with a commitment to results, as well as a warmth that she imparts on her team, which leads to such great results for HEC. And Susie McGovern, one of the latest members of the HEC team, who in such a short period of time has been the person that we can really lean on for watchdogging permits having to do with the White River. And she's already notched up some pretty significant victories in her short tenure with us. So we're looking for many more years with Susie ahead. Lastly, I want to thank our policy directors and policy leaders here, Tim Maloney, Kim Ferraro, Indra Frank, and Paula Brooks. Tim Maloney is our senior policy director, and he has played a monumental role in the Indiana environmental movement since the very beginning of HEC. In fact, he was a founding member of the board of the Hoosier Environmental Council. And Tim has really become a very well-regarded leader in the areas of open space protection, such as his statewide leadership in trying to fight the I-69 highway for many years, and now more recently helping with a broad coalition against the Mid-States Project. And on coal ash, he has been a statewide leader, and on transportation systems, alternative transportation systems like passenger rail and mass transit. Kim Ferraro has been a real hero to victims of factory farm pollution. You couldn't ask for a better ally in the courts in the fight to try to stop factory farms from doing great harm to communities than Kim Ferraro. And it's not just that she has the intellect to take on these big agribusinesses, but she has the results, including a landmark victory just this year in the federal courts. Dr. Indra Frank, our environmental health director and our water policy director, who has who had a very distinguished career as a Johns Hopkins educated pathologist and gave up that career to devote herself to children's environmental health, serving as a volunteer for many years at the forefront of protecting children from mercury and lead, and then eventually becoming a part of the HEC team as our Director of Environmental Health and Water Policy. And in that role, she's really become a statewide leader in terms of wetlands protections, waterway protections, lead prevention, and other issues that affect children's health. And also notched up some very significant victories, including helping with the lead policy reform that Gary Holland talked about earlier today. Lastly, Paula Brooks, the newest member of this foursome, who is our environmental justice coordinator. Paula Brooks has a distinguished career as a community leader, and we are so fortunate now that she is a full-time member of our team. She has pioneered a dedicated Indianapolis-focused environmental justice initiative, and in the 4 or 5 years that she has been leading that initiative, she's won some really important victories in which she has trained and empowered volunteers in different environmental justice communities to take action. And that coordination of her wisdom and knowledge and warmth and political savvy have led to some very significant victories in a short period of time that has won her statewide recognition. So with that opportunity to lift up our board, a couple of staff members that time did not allow me to thank earlier today, and our senior staff, I'm very pleased to welcome them to the stage for our final panel discussion. Hello, everyone. Indra, Kim, Paula, and Tim, so good to be with all of you for my final Greening the State House as ED. All right. Well, we're going to dive in here. And you might ask yourself, guys, you know, this is different from before. Why are you ending off Greening the State House with this panel discussion? And that's a very fair question that folks in the audience may have. And the reason and objective of this panel is multifold. One is that I'd like for you to get to know Indra, Kim, Tim, and Paula better. They will be continuing to be part of the HEC team after I'm gone, and they certainly will be playing the leadership role that they have been playing many years to come. Secondly, I wanted to make sure that we are able to field questions from the audience that we didn't get to. One of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten from you over the years is, Jesse, I wish there were more time to pose questions and have them answered. So we hope to do that through this opportunity as well. A third reason why we're having this panel discussion is we simply want to be more mindful of the issues out there. You know, I feel that HEC's senior team has a really good pulse on all the big issues in the state, but clearly we're going to have blind spots. And I hope that this discussion helps to unearth issues that we may not be putting at the right level of tier of focus, thanks to the feedback from all the great people in our audience. So with that, why don't I just dive in with a couple of basic questions for the team. And then, like I said, I would very much encourage everyone everyone who's listening in now to pose questions to us, and I'll do my best to integrate several of them into our conversation. So why don't we start with this question? A lot of environmental activists feel a sense of despair about the ability to make serious environmental change, given the enduring power of special interests. What has given you hope in 2021 that such forces can be overcome? And so let me pose this question. I'm going to do it in alphabetical order for Indra first. And if all of you could just answer it briefly, we'll move on to the next question. Okay, looks like Indra's having some technical issues. So let's just briefly go to Kim for a second, and then we'll get back to Indra.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, first, Jesse, thank you so much for the acknowledgments and tributes to the team. And I know I speak on behalf of the team in saying that we could not have done what we do without your visionary leadership, and you will be greatly missed. So I know you'll be hearing lots of that. Hopefully you've gotten to take a look at the kudos board and all the well wishes from all the people across the state of Indiana, and respect that we all have for you. As far as what gives me hope is the fact that there are so many people that have joined this movement calling for change, especially the last panel that we just had, teens, children getting involved in the climate movement. There's just so much going on that it's hard to feel despair, because really the majority of us all want that change and we're all working for it. And ultimately, just like any other major movement, women's movement, civil rights movement, that's what it takes, is this persistent passion, caring, and people getting involved. And I definitely see that, and it's certainly a cause for hope for me.
Thank you, Kim, for your very kind words. And why don't we go to Paula, and then hopefully Indra will be able to join us. And Paula, you're on mute.
I'm muted. Thank you, Jesse, for the kind words. And I also just want to say that I'm very grateful and honored to be able to work with Tim, Kim, Indra, and yourself. I've learned a lot, and just thank you for that. But what gives me hope are the young people that I work with. And I've been fortunate to work with young people from all over the state who come here to go to school, University of Indianapolis and IUPUI primarily, and even a couple of Butler students. But their determination to make change, it just gives me hope, because I'm of the generation that we're kind of done. It's over and we've accepted. And when I talk to the kids, they're like, no, it's a black and white issue for them. And that gives me hope. Because transformational change, you have to push the envelope, and the kids are doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. Why don't we turn this over to Tim, and then we'll get to Indra.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you for the kind words, and also grateful for your long and effective leadership at HEC. I'm inspired by several things that give me hope. Certainly the quality of the people involved in this work are inspiring, including my colleagues, but also so many others of the people that we see around and that we've heard from during Greening the State House. And like Paula, I think seeing young people in engagement today is inspiring. And finally, I'd mention that I think the economics of our point of view are starting to be recognized, and that's creating change too, and will continue to do that on its own. In that having a more sustainable economy and moving away from fossil fuels and all the economic virtue of that direction is going to come into play more and more and more as time goes on. So there is real hope out there, I think.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for your kind words there. And we'll turn it back to Indra. I hope your audio is good to go.
I hope so too. How's that sound?
Sounds perfect.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. I think I got the biggest boost this year from the massive outpouring of support for wetland preservation. when that anti-wetlands bill hit the legislature, there really was just kind of a massive outpouring of support from all over the state, and it's all of those people in Indiana that really give me hope.
Wonderful. All right, great. We'll go to a question of, I'm just looking at some nice comments in the chat here. Let's see, a question from, a kind of a bit of a technical question from Joanne, but I do want to be good faith and kind of integrating questions from the audience here. So Joanne asks, can a town BCA change zoning of an isolated wetland without requesting copies of the required state and federal wetland impact permits?
I probably should be the one to tackle that. I'm not quite sure I understand the question. If you're asking, can the BZA change regulatory requirements for an isolated wetland that is less stringent than what the state requires, that would not be allowed. But a BZA could, and actually it would be the county commissioners, the legislative body. The BZA is a quasi-judicial body, so it wouldn't be the BZA that does that. But the county commissioners would be able to change protections for isolated wetlands that are more protective than what the state requires. I'm not sure if that is what Joanne was asking, but as a general principle, hopefully that covers it.
I think that's true, that local government entities that have zoning authority can create layers in
Right.
zoning that protect natural resources like wetlands.
Right. Yeah, there's no, under the Federal Clean Water Act, there is no prohibition on states or local governments from going further than what the Clean Water Act requires, which is why we have an isolated wetland law. And similarly, under that law, there is, to my knowledge, no prohibition on local governments going further and providing further protection.
Thank you, Kim and Indra. Audience, please, this is your wonderful opportunity to ask questions of this great set of experts and policy leaders. So please fire away. I think we'll move on to another question here, which is, environmental injustice is a reality. And it's a reality, of course, in urban area, which Paula spoke to, as well as in rural Indiana, as Kim spoke to. Do you see the potential of a new block of pro-environmental lawmakers emerging from urban and rural Indiana? In other words, combining forces across this geographic divide. And have you seen examples of that? And let me pose this question to Tim, who of all of us has spent the most time in the State House.
Well, Jesse, I'd say that we are seeing a new generation, I think, of environmentally minded legislators on the urban side, and I think in to some extent in both parties, and that's encouraging. As far as at the rural level, I think the change is happening somewhat at the local government level, but it's hard to see it manifesting itself in the representation at the State House. But I mean, we could see some changes in the coming years, but I haven't seen it so far.
Would anyone else thank you, Tim, and would anyone else like to weigh in on that question? And we don't necessarily need to do a round robin for all of these, but do you want to give others an opportunity if they'd like?
Well, I would just only add, I agree with what Tim said. And of course, we're sad to see Representative Tom Saunders go, who was awarded today for his leadership on this issue, despite the views of his party on factory farming and other serious environmental issues that threaten rural areas. I will say that we have seen over the years, the Republican Party saying enough's enough, that the livestock lobby has gone overboard in a couple of places. For example, the attempt to amend the state constitution to create a constitutional right to harm, that was not allowed. The ag-gag bills. I mean, there have been a couple of really bad pieces of legislation that didn't pass. And that, obviously was because of huge grassroots organizing and leadership by us and other organizations. But the fact that we were able to defeat those bills, I think, speaks to the fact that maybe there's hope on that horizon.
And Jesse, I would just quickly add there are some exceptions among established veteran legislators at the rural level. I mean, Kim mentioned one of them, and I can think of several others around the state in that respect. But in terms of seeing a trend, I don't see that on the rural side.
Okay. I'll actually chime in on this question by simply saying that I see solar energy as being an area that could bridge the urban and rural divide. Thanks to leaders like Denise Abdul Rahman, the NAACP has really engaged on energy policy in a big way in our state. And we're seeing rural Indiana, of course, benefit mightily from renewables with, something on the order of 8 times more investment in solar being installed over this decade than we currently have. So I see that being a possible area where relationships can be built related to sustainability issues over time. Again, we welcome your questions, and I'll move on to another one here, which is the growing adoption of conservation farming practices like cover cropping and the rapid decline of coal and rapid ascendancy of renewables, as I mentioned just a moment ago, have been inspiring trends. Looking to 2022 and beyond, what do you see as other hopeful trends with regard to the emergence of the sustainable economy? And maybe I'll pose that to Tim first, again, because I know that ties into your panel discussion.
Did you say Kim or Tim?
Oh, that's a good point. This is a perennial dilemma at HEC. Tim with the T.
Well, I think a good indication of that is what Mike Hicks talked about, and what you're seeing reflected in these new state programs encouraging, regional collaboration. And I think you mentioned the READY program when you spoke, and that program's largely focused on quality of place and quality of life, along with regional collaboration. And so at the local level, there is a growing recognition of the importance of community amenities like parks and trails and greenways and other open space, and that's so you see those kind of projects incorporated in all of those READY applications from the regions that have formed, and you see it reflected in the demand for next level trails funding, which the demand is far outstripping the amount of available funds, even with an additional $60 million for that program in the last budget. The demand is still above what's available. So, and this is happening statewide and in rural and urban areas. So it's that's at least one indicator of change in this area.
Thank you, Tim. A question from Robin ties into this issue to some degree. Do you think that the lack of change in representation for rural Indiana means that people who live there are not supportive of protecting the environment? What could we do to influence our rural fellow Hoosiers?
I'll take a stab at that, Jesse. I don't, at least the people that I've met that live in rural Indiana would disagree that they don't care about the environment. I think that they do very much. I think there's a disconnect between what their values are and what they see as their local or their state representative. If, for example, if these folks are Republican, they may be voting along ideological lines instead of making that connection between environmental protection and the candidate. So there is that. And I also think that there is such a strong hold by the Indiana Farm Bureau and powerful lobbyists that are able to get people elected in the state house, and we don't have a counter voice in rural Indiana with putting up candidates that are viable to get elected there. So those are just two, I guess, somewhat anecdotal pieces of information in response to that question.
I'd like to
please
chip in on that one. It's my understanding. I mean, I do not work professionally in the agriculture realm, but my work on water policy intersects with, the water issues in Indiana's agricultural profession. And it's my understanding that more and more farmers are taking an interest in conservation farming, farming that protects our waterways. So I think that's also a trend in the rural areas. And as Jesse mentioned earlier, increasing use of cover crops. Indiana is number 2 in the nation for use of cover crops. That helps protect our soil, keeps it from eroding, which protects our waterways. But another, since we're sort of going back to that question about trends from a minute ago, one of the trends that at least has appeared to me is that we've got more concern for environmental justice than Indiana used to have. But I should pass that one to Paula. What do you think? Has awareness increased?
Awareness has, and I think it's really due to people who move here from other places, and they're just kind of really appalled at the reality for so many residents. I think that's where the change is coming from. It's not a change that's coming internally, because I believe that given the strength of the Republican Party in this state, that people are apathetic. They've just really given up really trying to be involved in that electoral process. And also, the Democratic Party is not as organized as they could be in terms of trying to recruit people. So I think there's kind of 2 issues there going on with that. But yes, there's definitely more awareness. And also another thing that I've noticed, especially here in Marion County, and I'm sure it's the same for South Bend and West Lafayette or Lafayette, is that with the gentrification happening, that has been accompanied by an increase in public investment in infrastructure. And that's an environmental justice issue. Safe sidewalks, safe crossings. Here in Marion County, the bicyclists are all up in arms because the trails are not safe, whereas residents that have been here, we're used to not being safe on our sidewalks, but they're pushing the change. And also they're younger. Again, I think that energy is coming from younger people.
Excellent. Thank you, Paula and Indra, for weighing in on that question as well. I'm thrilled to see audience questions beginning to come in. The next one has to do with transportation. We'll pose this to Tim. Gary raised the observation that intermodal transportation is becoming more and more prevalent across America. Indiana is kind of falling behind in this area. One notable positive example is the planned interconnection between the South Shore Westlake project and the bike and greenways there, bike trails and greenways there. And the question that Gary poses is, how do we change INDOT's attitude about intermodal transportation systems?
Well, there's no silver or magic wand there to do that. I think it's going to have to come from the community level, because that's where the greatest interest is and support for a more intermodal system. And the one exception in Indiana to which Gary referenced in terms of the kind of the anti-transit rail active transportation elements of transportation is the South Shore. And the South Shore is undergoing two different expansion projects, the double tracking going east and west, and then the extension south and farther south in Lake County. And that's happening because it has very strong local community support, and that has translated into state support. The state's putting a lot of money into that expansion of the South Shore, as well as the feds and locals, but that's because it has a whole lot of community support, and that's what it's going to take to do that. And the expansion of Indigo in Indianapolis came about because of community support. And I think the work that Gary Public Transportation is doing has a lot of public support. But another a counterexample is in southeastern Indiana, where the public transit system serving the Jeffersonville, New Albany, Clarksville area is the Louisville public transit system, and the limited service it provides in the Indiana side of the river gets very little local support, and with one exception, but it doesn't. So it's not growing in any meaningful way, and so that's what it takes, and that'll translate to more support at the state level with INDOT. But at the same time, they hear from a lot of the state legislators and business leaders about just building more roads, and that's a counter pressure that we have to address. So.
And I can give an example of what Tim is speaking to here in Marion County with the Rethink initiative. Even though we were not, and I should mention that I'm the chair of the Environmental Justice and Equity Committee, and I've been involved from its inception. But we were able to influence the design of the reconstruction of the North Split, and we started years late. And one reason for that is that we had community support. So INDOT was a force to come to the table, and several of the group members were technical people who understood how to build an interstate. So you also need that technical expertise as well to be able to analyze various projects, because you may not be able to stop them, but you can make them better.
That's a critical point. Thank you, Paula and Tim. Next question is from Ray, and he asks, if you could wave your magic wand to make the ideal happen, what would be the environmental climate picture? What would it look like in Indiana in 5 to 10 years' time? I'll start with you, Paula, for that one. What's your dream for the next 5 to 10 years for either environmental justice or environmental climate justice, however you want to answer that question?
My dream would be, as I believe her name was Mary, was promoting that IDEM is strengthened, and especially the enforcement arm of the agency, because there's a lot of dedicated and talented staff, but there's not enough. And also, they're not able to go as deep into protection as I would like. And that's political. So that would be my dream, just a strong item that could advocate for the people.
Amen to that. Kim, do you want to take a shot at that as well? Kim with the K?
Well, I would agree wholeheartedly with Paula. I mean, we need to have a state environmental agency that has a solid environmental justice policy in place that actually considers the views of impacted communities on new developments. Right now, I think largely there's lip service that gets paid to the public commenting process where, people make comments, but the decision has really already been made. And, of course, these are the communities that have to live with IDEM's decisions. And we know that the process is pretty stacked against them, certainly based on the appeals outcomes, as we reported on for the Office of Environmental Adjudication, where citizens haven't won an appeal of an IDEM permit in more than 15 years. So yeah, the public input process, if I had got to wish one thing, it would be to change that.
Yes, thank you. Indra, I'm wondering if you could answer this question from the lens of the intersection between environmental justice and children's health. What would be your dream 5 to 10 years from now?
Oh, well, first off, I love this idea of the magic wand. And Ray, if you come up with a way to obtain one of those, let us know, please. And at the risk of sounding a little bit like a broken record, I'm going to go back to lead. We still have lead hazards in this state. We still have on the order of 2,000 kids per year lead poisoned. And that means kids who aren't achieving either the IQ, or the scholastic level that they could, naturally could have achieved if they hadn't been exposed to lead. So in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe we could really make some progress on getting rid of Indiana's lead hazards for children. That would be tremendous. My other wish with the magic wand, and I know I was limited to just one, but I'm going to sneak another one in there, would be that Hoosiers all across the state understand the importance of reducing their use of fossil fuels. That we really develop a culture of protecting the planet from climate change.
Great point. Next, two kind of interrelated questions are on KFOs, Michael and Katie. Michael's question, Kim, was really to comment on the trend line here for KFOs, for factory farms. Going upward, going downward? If it's going downward, what's sort of the timeline we're talking about to see the end of these factory farms? Right.
Well, I mean, since COVID, we have seen a little bit of a stalemate of a plateauing of new permits for new KFOs. And I think that's largely related to the demand side, the issues that we have at a national level with infrastructure and all of the problems that we had with COVID, with processing plants shutting down because of the pandemic. So I wouldn't, before the pandemic hit, it was like whack-a-mole. I mean, there were new KFO permits all over the place. And you can't just look at the number of facilities. Existing facilities are getting larger. So the impact in a particular community is getting worse where existing KFOs are. But on the hopeful side, and for those of you that heard my panel today or heard my presentation today, there is a focus now and a rise and increasing demand for sustainably sourced food, humanely sourced foods. It's one of the greatest emerging markets in agriculture for organic and and equitable, sustainable foods. So that's really hopeful. And I think that our messaging and our work on this is also transitioning to be looking at what is it that we want instead of what is it that we don't want. And that's not to say that we're not going to keep doing our technical assistance work and our legal work in litigating against irresponsibly placed confined feeding operations. But truly, we all have the power to make, to support the food system that we want, and to not support the one that we don't want. And I do see that happening where folks are starting to make that connection. So I think consumer demand is going to be playing a very big role in that in the coming years, especially with climate change and the IPCC's link to our meat habit to greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not just, being mindful of fossil fuel use, it's being mindful of what we put in our mouth and what impact that has on the climate and the planet.
Thank you, Kim. Next question I think I'll pose to Paula, and this has to do with the Fulcrum Bioenergy project up in Gary, Indiana, which both Susan now and Walt earlier raised. And, the question really has to do with how do we reconcile with the fact that on the one hand, legislation was passed in the General Assembly that essentially facilitates the growth of kind of quality of life amenities in Gary. And at the same time, they're contemplating building this massive factory, which will increase the pollution footprint, which is very significant there. How do you square these two, or can you square these two?
No, you can't really square these two. They're totally different, two different issues. So one issue is always sold as economic development, job creation, also the fact that the county or the city welcomes these types of projects. And then you have the people. And again, if you're not living in close proximity to these facilities, you're not really concerned about them. So, Jesse, I'm not that optimistic about really being able to change the mindset of our elected officials in terms of job creation and economic development. I was really glad to hear about the fact that there's opportunity in non-traditional economic activities here in Indiana. So hopefully, again, younger people will take on the challenge of promoting these types of endeavors, because no one really wants to go work in a steel facility anymore. So I'm hopeful, but I don't think you can really reconcile the two.
Indra, would you like to comment on this question as well? Thank you, Paula. Given your work in Muncie and Logansport.
Right, yeah, and then Tim's panel earlier, really highlighted this issue. The economics need a good hard look, as Tim's speaker Mike, sorry, can't think of his name, pointed out earlier. Mike
Hicks,
thank you, the economist from Ball State, that the real job growth isn't in manufacturing these days. And yet we seem to have an established template, or maybe a habit, it could be called, of localities around the state thinking that what they need to do is bring in, some kind of manufacturing in order to get jobs. I think if we were to look at the total life cycle economics of plants like this, like the Fulcrum proposal up in Gary, what you'd see is, yes, that it would create some jobs for a finite period of time, and then the plant would close and probably leave behind a heavily contaminated site that's a heavy burden to taxpayers, and that drops the property values that are all around it. And on top of that, sites like this often get a tax break from local government when they're first brought in. And if you add all that up together, do we really see an economic benefit in the long run? I think that's the kind of economics that proposals like this need to be subjected to. And then there's also the question that came up, when with our speakers from Northwest Indiana, that area is already industry intensive. Somebody needs to look at the cumulative impact and whether that's really the right location for adding even more heavy industry.
Excellent points there, Indra. Thank you. Let me make sure that Tim is part of this conversation. So I'll pose the next one to you, Tim, which is someone had asked, Mary had asked about the governor's office and IDEM and what latitude the governor has to enhance the powers of IDEM, including enforcement-wise.
Well, IDEM works for the governor. They're an executive agency under the governor's direction. So the governor can't unilaterally change our environmental laws, but he can change the posture of the agency in how they deal with compliance and enforcement, and also influence resources for the agency in terms of staffing and salaries and the ability of the agency to hire and retain well-qualified people. Those are all largely under the control of the governor, and so the governor sets the tone for any agency and the way they approach the mission of that agency, and when it's one like IDEM that is involved in regulation and compliance and enforcement, the tone that the governor sets is what will be the tone of the agency, and it wasn't always a positive tone in the past, and I think the current IDEM has had a little more latitude, but they are we still see real flaws in compliance and enforcement. And you heard Natalie Johnson talking about all the problems with the spills in Northwest Indiana and the inadequate response of the agency, and you can connect that back to how the governor instructs his agency heads.
Thank you, Tim. I feel like, Kim, you wanted to weigh in on this, and you are.
I do. I think that Tim is right. Absolutely, the governor sets the tone because the agency works for the governor. But I think just to dig down a little bit deeper, if you look at the structure of the way our environmental laws are enacted and enforced, right? You have the state legislature that writes the laws, and of course Congress writes federal environmental laws that also IDEM has the authority to implement. And language matters, and language can be interpreted in different ways. And so if you have a governor that is progressive on the environment, then the agency will, to Tim's point, be construing that language in a way that is protective. Versus if you have a governor that is more business friendly and wants IDEM to get out of the way, then those regulations will be construed very differently, even though they're exactly the same laws. And so interpretation is really where rubber hits the road with respect to environmental protection at the governor's level. What the state legislatures can do is that they can make their language more clear. If they want to protect wetlands better, or they want to whatever policy is at issue, they can use words like shall and must instead of squishy language that's subject to interpretation by the agency. So I just wanted to add that. Yeah. And that's where lawsuits come into play too, by the way. We lawyers need to fight over all sorts of different interpretations about what the regulations and laws mean. So that gives rise to a lot of fun for us.
Thank you, Kim. Good words of wisdom there. Why don't we stick with you, Kim, for just a second on a question that was asked by Lance about KFOs.
Okay.
He wanted to know about antitrust policy, if that's a strategy that has legs in Indiana to take on KFOs.
Well, Lance, as you may know, antitrust is a federal law, the Packard and Stockyards Act. And during my presentation, I mentioned very briefly a bill that is out there called the Farm System Reform Act. And one of the provisions of that bill would be to bust up the big agribusiness monopolies. So yeah, we support that bill. And yes, I think everybody should be calling on our congressional leaders to pass that bill.
Definitely. Excellent call to action there. Let's see here. Many good questions. And by the way, audience, we only have 12 minutes left for this particular session. So please continue to ask your questions. Even if we don't get to them, they can help shape possible future webinars that we could possibly schedule during the 2022 legislative session. So getting your feedback, hearing what's on your mind, would be incredibly helpful. Katie has brought up the issue of the supermajority, and really, maybe I'll broaden her question in the context of redistricting. What kind of ability do people have to influence their lawmakers in districts that are even more gerrymandered than they were the last 10 years? Tim, do you want to take a shot at that? Tim with a T.
Did you say Tim?
Tim with a T.
Well, it can certainly make it harder to influence a lawmaker when they feel like their seat is secure no matter what they do. But having said that, I mean, local politics is still a big factor in how state legislators look at issues, and even a majority legislator in a secure district has to worry about primaries and primary challengers from his own party, so really with any state legislator in their district, you've got to be prepared to try to influence local politics and local views and local thinking and local action through the whole range of activity that we've been talking about today. And that is still the most effective way to influence legislative thinking, is what's going on in the district and how do you sway public sentiment to be on your side, and the legislators will pay attention to that. It may take a while, but they will ultimately.
Thank you, Tim. Next question here is: there's a large fraction of the American and Hoosier population who hold hostile views towards the federal government. The irony is that the federal government has done so much. The federal government's laws have done so much to improve air and water quality in America and in Indiana. Have you encountered any effective strategies to change people's attitudes about government and its effectiveness? Indra, just to make sure we're balanced, I'll pose this question first to you.
Oh, it's a good question, Jesse. It's a tough one, though. Yeah, it seems like a big part of our problem in dealing with environmental issues now has to do with the battle over perception and the battle over information and misinformation. I wish I had a solution for it. I mean, at HEC, our approach has always been to be absolutely scrupulous in researching our facts and staying based on the science and based on the facts. And there are times when it feels like facts just don't carry the day, including facts about what the federal laws are and the benefit that they've had for us, as this question posed. The 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act is coming up in 11 months. And I'm involved with some of our national level partners in planning for the 50th anniversary. And my hope is that will do one small part, at least, to disseminating more information about the benefits from that, important federal law. Just one example, anyway.
Thank you, Indra. Want to pose with an eye to the clock. I'll move on to the next topic, which is Amanda Cantrell had asked, is there a difference in food safety with sustainably sourced foods? Kim, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I would say as a general proposition, it is more safe than food that comes from our industrial system that we have now. I think there's an image perception that is really wrong on that. Folks think that if it comes from a big factory, then there must be all sorts of inspections and things that keep our food safe. But the truth is we have, salmonella and E. coli outbreaks all the time. Much of our the way we produce meat and dairy have given rise to some new diseases, new pathogens, new viruses. So the way we're currently producing food now is not very safe at all. When you know a local farmer, when you know where your food comes from, there is immediate accountability right there. So if something isn't right, you know who to contact. Whereas now we're so far removed from who produces our food that there isn't that accountability.
Very good. Thank you, Kim. Paula, I want to get back to the question of environmental justice communities and the fact that oftentimes they are in low-income areas where there are already a lot of stresses on a given household or a given neighborhood. How have you found folks paying attention to environmental issues when there's so many other things that they may be hurting from?
There's a connection between environmental hazards, health impacts or outcomes, and quality of life. And, at the end of the day, Jesse, everyone kind of wants the same thing, regardless of your station in life. You want peace of mind. You want your children to be happy and healthy. You want to be happy and healthy. You want to have a home. You want to eat good foods. You want to laugh. So my charge has been to make that connection between environmental hazards in various neighborhoods, especially disinvested neighborhoods, and quality of life issues. It's not an easy It's not an easy endeavor. But again, when you find common factors, you can build on that. And I kind of have a talent for finding that, and I've been able to expound on that. So that's kind of where I am with that. But it's a struggle. It's really hard to, I can just give an example for people who are local. I'm a third generation resident of Indiana Avenue area, and people always they have an emotional connection to the area, given what has happened and what has transpired. But our reality in this neighborhood with a hostile built environment does not match the fantasy in people's minds about what the neighborhood could be. So also just trying to be realistic, manage expectations as well.
Thank you, Paula. We're lucky that you can draw those connections so well in these communities. So thank you very much. We only have 3 minutes left, and so I'm going to ask kind of a very practical question for you, for each of you. And again, we're grateful for the questions that the audience has posed. I know I didn't get to all of them, but please continue to populate it. So again, you can provide us food for thought for future webinars and online programs. And the practical question for each of you is, the 2022 session is coming up in less than 6 weeks. What each of you has your own portfolio of bills that you focus on, and what are going to be your top 2 calls to action to people based on your understanding of the bills that are going to show up in your portfolio? We'll start with Indra.
The top 2 for me, one is this bill that we've heard but haven't seen yet, that would reduce the state's authority when it comes to construction in a floodway. The state has authority over construction in the floodway to prevent exacerbations of flooding, right? This is another one of those private property issues where what you do to the ditch or stream that's on your property affects your neighbors and the folks downstream. All of our waterways are interconnected. So the call to action there would be for everyone to talk to your state representative and your state senator and talk with them about the importance of protecting our waterways and the state's authority to prevent flooding. The other bill that I know is being filed is Representative Carolyn Jackson's bill to reduce exposure to lead in our child care centers. Mm-hmm. So I'll be working with the State Lead Coalition to support her bill.
Very good. Thank you, Indra. Kim with K.
Yes, I'm not aware of any specific bills, Jesse, but I will say that every year we pretty consistently see at least some effort to further erode protections of rural communities with respect to factory farms. And then we pretty have consistently seen some sorts of measures to reduce the rights of people to protect themselves in court. And those bills have come in all sorts of different forms. So I guess the call to action that I would ask is that everybody pay attention to our action alerts so that we can alert you when we need folks to be calling in to their legislators on short notice.
Very good, very good. And to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well for that kind of real-time update. Tim?
Well, a couple topics that we'll certainly be watching for and anticipate some action on. Number one, new or refiled legislation on carbon sequestration, whether that's terrestrial sequestration in forests and soils, and the carbon markets element of that, and then also a geological sequestration language related to this proposed project out in Terre Haute, the Wabash Valley Resources hydrogen plant. So those a couple things we'll be looking for, and then there's some talk about state spending being reopened in a non-budget year because of the record growth of our state surplus, unexpected growth in that, and that whether there are opportunities to put those new funds to good purpose. And certainly we have a long list of good purposes that those funds could be put to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. Paula, I know that your work is very focused on Indy, but would you like to weigh in on this?
Oh, I can. I'm actually have been involved for the past several months of working with developers, the city residents, and also the state community stakeholders on a $100 million investment in Martindale, Brightwood community and Crosstown community. Crosstown community has been an area that has not seen any investment in the past 40 years. So the residents were ecstatic that a developer wanted to come in and build something nice along the Monon and wanted their input. We've been meeting weekly, and I've just been so happy to see the relationships develop between the community, the residents, and the developer. But out of this working group, we're developing a community benefit agreement. And my hope is that this agreement will serve as a template going forward for transformational development in environmental justice communities, not only here in Indianapolis, but statewide, because it's just a matter of time. Evansville, Lafayette, and at least residents would have some type of template to be able to make sure that their voices are heard. The City County Council is working on an anti-displacement gentrification ordinance here. This program or this working group that we've constructed or developed is going to serve as a model or a pilot for that ordinance. So I'm really happy about it, and my call to action is that when the council asks for support for this ordinance, that the residents will support this ordinance 100%. And I'm also hopeful that this infrastructure money that's coming down the pipeline, that it is going to make change for residents on the outer sections of Marion County, places that need public transportation, as well as kind of maintenance of the interstate that abuts people's homes, tree canopies to kind of shield them from the diesel fumes. So I'm hoping that money will go to those communities and not go to vanity projects as well. So I'm asking people also to support Justice 40, which is an initiative, a national initiative that the federal agencies devote 40% of their funding from this infrastructure bill to environmental justice communities.
Thank you, Paula, for filling us in on imminent policy opportunities at the local and at the federal level related to EJ there. I'll answer this question from my end in terms of state legislative endeavors by simply bringing up that we definitely expect to see at least one bill related to rooftop solar in Indiana. As some of you know in the audience, perhaps many of you know in the audience, net metering, which is the public policy that's been in place in Indiana since 2005, is going to be eliminated in Indiana, making us one of the first states to legislatively eliminate net metering. This is, again, the policy that is one that if you're putting excess generation on the grid, you have historically been credited at the retail level. This will go down to the wholesale level for everyone who installs after July 1st, 2022. And furthermore, it has a further poison pill that's called no netting, which Ben Inskeep talked about in great detail during his presentation yesterday. And so really the calls to action related to rooftop solar are to preserve and extend net metering beyond its expiration date and to go to monthly netting as opposed to zero netting. The other big bill that we anticipate this coming session has to do with broad, big-scale renewable energy projects. We do expect some kind of some kind of reincarnation of a bill having to deal with siting of renewable energy projects. There's this tug of war taking place between the developers who want to see things standardized across the state and the local governments who want the power in their hands. The one piece that HEC is consistently weighing in on is for locals to have the right to enact environmentally friendly solar ordinances, also known as pollinator-friendly solar ordinances, so that solar projects are designed in such a way as to maximize the community benefits of solar, that it's not just serving private landowners, but the community at large in terms of stormwater management, soil and water conservation, wildlife habitat protection, etc. So the call to action there again is to make sure that these local ordinances remain in place and that future ones are allowed to be developed without state interference. So with that, I'm going to express my great appreciation to Dr. Indra Frank, Kim Ferraro, Paula Brooks, and Tim Maloney, fantastic policy team here, for all their insights and knowledge on this final panel.